Have you ever found yourself trapped in a moment like this? You lose a job, and you genuinely believe it's the absolute end of your career. A relationship falls apart, and you sink into a deep darkness, convinced that true happiness will never find you again. Something unexpected goes wrong, and instantly your mind slaps a label on it. Bad luck. A tragedy. A curse. We spend our entire lives playing an endless game of chase. We run desperately toward things we label as good luck and spend all our energy fleeing from what we judge as risk. Our minds become like a tiny, fragile boat tossed violently by the ocean, lifted to the peaks of joy by external winds, then instantly dragged down into the abyss of despair by a single negative shift. But the Buddha taught that the world is inherently impermanent, and all things arise from interconnected causes and conditions. Nothing exists in isolation. Every event that enters your life is part of a grand, mysterious web of cause and effect. What looks like a devastating catastrophe today might actually be the rough packaging of a profound blessing. And what looks like a glittering gift today might hold the hidden seeds of your downfall tomorrow. If you are exhausted from constantly trying to force, control, and micromanage every single piece of your life, I invite you to pause. Quiet your mind and listen closely to a timeless Zen story about an old farmer and his horse. This story will permanently shift the way you look at the bad luck in your life. Let's travel back in time to a remote borderland where jagged mountain peaks cut sharply across the sky, where cold winds sweep through empty wilderness, and the sound of horse hooves echoes through the morning mist. In that barren land, an old farmer lived with his only son in a small, weathered earthen hut. Their lives were completely simple and quiet. The family's most valuable possession, their only true asset, was a powerful, beautiful white stallion. He wasn't just an animal, he was the family's livelihood. Because of his strength, the old man could plow the stubborn, dry soil, haul heavy bundles of firewood through the valley, and survive the brutal winter months. But then, one freezing night, as a harsh mountain wind rushed down the valley, a sudden sharp sound broke the silence. Click. The old wooden gate of the stable swung wide open. Startled by the storm, the white stallion leapt over the fence and vanished into the pitch-black night. He ran straight toward the wild, uncharted mountains across the border, a lawless territory where humans rarely dared to tread. The next morning, when the old man stepped out into the courtyard, he was greeted by nothing but an empty stable. The horse was gone. The news spread like wildfire through the small village. The neighbors rushed over, staring at the empty pen and looking at the old man with deep sympathy. They sighed, shook their heads, and said, "What an absolute tragedy! You were already poor, and now you've lost your only valuable asset. How will you survive the winter?" "This is a curse." The sound of lamentation filled the air. Yet the old man just stood there, silently gazing at the distant mountains. He poured a cup of warm tea, took a slow sip, and said calmly, "The horse is gone. That is a simple fact. But whether this is a curse or a blessing, who among us can truly know?" The villagers shook their heads. They muttered to themselves that the old man was simply in denial, driven mad by grief. But life has a way of unfolding far beyond the calculations of the human mind. A few months later, a thick fog rolled into the valley. Suddenly, a familiar sound echoed from the distance. Clop, clop, clop. The sound of horse hooves grew louder and faster. The startled villagers ran outside, and then they froze in absolute disbelief. The missing white stallion was returning. But what left them breathless was that trailing closely behind him were 6 wild horses, massive, powerful, and majestic. During his time in the wilderness, the stallion had integrated into a wild herd and led them all back to the farm. In a single day, the old man's family went from poverty to owning the most magnificent herd of horses in the region. This time, the villagers didn't sigh. They crowded around the farm, cheering excitedly. "You are incredibly lucky. You lost 1 horse and gained 7. This is a massive blessing from the heavens." But the old man only offered a quiet smile. He looked out at the herd in his courtyard and said softly, "Perhaps it is a blessing, but perhaps it is a curse. Only time will tell." The villagers found his reaction bizarre. They thought to themselves, how can he doubt such an obvious stroke of fortune? But then, the wheel of fate spun once more. A few weeks later, the old man's only son began the dangerous work of breaking and training the wild horses. He was young. He was strong. He believed he could control everything. But he was wrong. One late afternoon, while attempting to ride the fiercest, most temperamental wild stallion, the beast exploded into a frenzy. It reared back, bucking violently, and hurled the young man through the air. A sickening crack shattered the silence. The son hit the ground hard, his leg shattered. In an instant, the vibrant young man, the sole hope of the family, became permanently disabled, left with a severe, painful limp for the rest of his life. Once again, the villagers gathered at the hut, but this time there were no cheers, only heavy sighs and pity. How heartbreaking. You only have 1 son. Now he is crippled. Who will take care of you in your old age? That herd of wild horses brought nothing but a curse upon your house. The old man sat quietly beside his bedridden son. He gently tended to the young man's wounds. Then he looked up at the neighbors and said, "My son broke his leg. That is a simple fact. But whether this is a curse or a blessing, no one knows yet." A year later, war broke out across the frontier. The thunder of war drums echoed violently along the border. The king issued an emergency decree. Every able-bodied young man in the region was to be immediately conscripted into the army and sent to the front lines. One by one, the sons of the village were dragged away. The mothers wept. The fathers fell silent. No one knew who would ever return. It was a brutal, merciless conflict. Nearly every young man who marched out of that village perished on the battlefield. The homes that were once full of life were plunged into a devastating, permanent silence. But in the old man's small earthen hut, the fire kept burning. The sun was still there, because the broken leg from the year before made him unfit for military service. He was permitted to stay behind, safe with his father. The 2 of them continued to plow the fields, cook their meals, and quietly survive the dark years of war together. Only then did the heartbroken villagers truly understand. The event they had once labeled a tragedy was actually the destiny's silent protection. A horse runs away, a herd returns, a leg is broken, a life is saved. Because in this life, nothing is purely good, and nothing is purely bad. Only when time flows forward can human beings comprehend the true meaning of what has unfolded. a blessing or a curse. It never lies in the event itself. It lies entirely in how we choose to see it. The old farmer in this ancient parable was not a cold-hearted machine. He wasn't a detached, unfeeling father who didn't care about his son's broken leg. His silence did not come from a place of apathy. It was born from the profound wisdom of a sage, someone who had thoroughly integrated the Buddhist laws of impermanence and dependent origination. The reason he could stand completely unshaken, smiling gently through both the tragic sighs and the loud, chaotic congratulations of the townspeople, was because he possessed a mental treasure that modern society is starving for: equanimity. In Zen philosophy, equanimity is not about running away from life or suppressing your emotions. It is the rare ability to observe events exactly as they are, without letting a fearful, anxious ego rush in to label them as right or wrong, good or bad, a blessing or a curse. Look at our modern lives today. Why do we fall into an emotional crisis so easily? Why does the slightest external inconvenience have the power to completely shatter your inner peace? It is because we are unconsciously locking ourselves into a psychological prison through three core cognitive distortions. The first distortion: short-sightedness. We only see a tiny, broken shard of the mirror. As human beings, we have a highly dangerous psychological habit. We look at one dark, painful chapter of our lives, and we immediately decide that the entire book is a tragedy. When you unexpectedly get laid off, your mind instantly isolates that single event, slaps a bright red label on it, and calls it an absolute failure. You sink into despair, crying in the dark, convinced that your future is completely ruined. But you forget that human perception is incredibly limited. You are looking at a single puzzle piece, a brief intermission in a thousands of pages long script written by destiny. How could you possibly know that losing that unfulfilling, dead-end job was the exact catalyst you needed to force you out of your comfort zone? How could you know it would give you the grit to pivot into a brand new career path that actually aligns with your passion, or inspire you to build your own successful business? That painful layoff was nothing more than the farmer's son breaking his leg. It is a temporary wound, a painful setback in the short term, but it might be the only shield protecting you from marching straight into a catastrophic battlefield later on. The Buddha taught that everything in this universe is woven together by a complex web of unseen conditions. A loss in the present is very often just life clearing out space to make room for something profound to arrive. When you rush to label an event as bad luck, you automatically blind yourself to the blessing hidden right beneath the surface. The second distortion: our addiction to control, the illusion of micromanaging destiny. Modern humans are control freaks. We live under a massive illusion that we can force this vast, chaotic world to follow the exact script we wrote in our heads. The valuable horse must never run away. The wild herd must instantly obey, and our children must always remain perfectly safe and healthy. We plan out our next 5-10 years. We micromanage every single step, and we arrogantly demand that life hand us the exact outcomes we want. But reality is infinitely larger, more complex, and more unpredictable than our tiny intellects can comprehend. A market crash, a sudden illness, a global shift, or simply a change in someone's heart. These are variables that will always be completely outside of your control. When you stubbornly try to use your small ego to fight against the massive ocean currents of impermanence, you are practically volunteering for emotional exhaustion. You break down when things derail. You mourn when your horse jumps the fence. The old farmer was entirely free because he had completely surrendered that illusion of control. He flowed with reality. When the horse left, he accepted the reality that the horse was gone. When it returned, he accepted that it had returned. He didn't waste energy trying to manage the wind. He managed his own sails. The moment you stop demanding that life conform to your expectations, you step into true, unshakable freedom. The third distortion, conditional happiness, handing the keys of your soul to the world. The third distortion, and the ultimate source of modern burnout, is that we have built a system of conditional happiness. You set strict rules for your own soul. I will only allow myself to be happy when the white stallion brings home 6 more wild horses. I will only feel at peace when life hands me wealth, validation, and a perfect record. And because of that contract, the moment a horse runs away or a leg gets broken, your entire world collapses into depression. Your happiness becomes a hostage, chained entirely to the volatile shifts of external circumstances. You hand the keys of your inner kingdom to conditions outside of yourself. If life treats you well, you smile. If life treats you poorly, you break. You turn yourself into a helpless victim of fate. The old farmer was completely free and profoundly at peace because his happiness had no conditions. It did not depend on whether his stable was full or empty, nor did it care about the praise or pity of his neighbors. His joy lived in the absolute stillness of a matured mind, a place where he understood that all things on this earth come and go, that what joins will eventually separate, and that blessing and curse are simply opposite sides of the exact same coin. When you cultivate true equanimity, you realize a beautiful truth. No circumstance has the inherent power to break you. It is only your desperate need to label and resist the circumstance that causes your suffering. Release your soul from the rigid prison of right and wrong, and you will find yourself walking calmly through any storm the world throws your way. Look at a river flowing out in the wild. It never wastes its energy or forces itself to fight against the sharp bends in its path, nor does it get angry at the massive boulders blocking its way. When it hits a rock, the river fluidly, effortlessly shapes its body and glides right around it. When it encounters a steep, terrifying cliff, it doesn't try to turn back. It boldly leaps off the edge, transforming itself into a magnificent waterfall, creating cool mist and life. It simply coexists with the layout of the earth, embracing every contour to eventually merge into the vastness of the ocean. Living a life of profound peace under the guidance of mindfulness is exactly like learning the art of water. Life is not a battlefield to be conquered. It is a current to be trusted. When luck, success, or beautiful blessings arrive at your doorstep, receive them with a deeply grateful heart, but do not let your ego inflate. Do not cling to them. Understand that they are simply a herd of wild horses visiting your courtyard today. Tomorrow, they may choose to run. Do not let the joy of possession morph into the toxic anxiety of loss. When hardship, loss, or unexpected chaos hits your life, receive it with absolute composure through the spaciousness of an empty cup. Instead of exhausting yourself asking, "Why me?" sit quietly in the stillness and look deeply into the situation. Ask yourself, what lesson of awakening is hidden behind this wound? You will realize that every broken leg in your journey is often a silent intervention by cause and effect, keeping you safely seated while a destructive war passes right by you. The old man's phrase, "Who knows what is a blessing and what is a curse?" is not a declaration of defeat or hopelessness. On the contrary, it is the absolute peak of liberation. It is the ultimate expression of an unwavering trust in the perfect, intricate balance of the universe. When you find the courage to strip away the heavy labels of bad luck or tragedy from the events of your life, you will notice that your soul naturally sheds its resentment, its anger, and its anxiety. You leave behind an open space for grace and resilience. You stop being a battered, broken boat. You become the ocean itself, silently holding every wave in your embrace. Right now, in this exact moment, wherever you are in the world, whether you are surrounded by the bright rays of morning or the quiet shadows of midnight, take just this one brief minute to completely pause, step away from the noise, and look into your own soul. Look at the cup of your mind after hours of moving through the fast-paced, chaotic demands of modern life. If your life recently has been heavy with unexpected setbacks, financial stress, fractured relationships, or sudden detours that you have been tightly labeling as bad luck or failure, stop fighting them. Stop trying to force the river to run backward. Let your entire body relax. Place a gentle hand over your heart and take a deep, slow breath in. Feel the raw, beautiful presence of life within you. And as you let it out, whisper the words of the old farmer to your own mind. Who knows what is a blessing and what is a curse? Surrender the exhausting illusion that you must control the universe. Trust the grand, unseen current of cause and effect. Trust that everything entering your life right now is exactly what your soul needs to experience, to grow, to heal, and to awaken. Empty the anxiety and the resentment out of your cup and reclaim the pure, untainted stillness that belongs to you. If you are ready to drop the exhausting weight of judgment, and if you choose to meet life with an open, graceful, and unshakable mind starting today, leave a comment below with just 2 words. Trust life. Writing these 2 words is not for the algorithm, nor is it to prove anything to the world outside. It is a sacred contract between you and your journey. It is a declaration that from this moment forward, you choose to be like water, flowing gracefully with the path, rather than breaking yourself against the rocks. Now drop the tension in your shoulders. Let go of the worry about tomorrow. Take a deep, gentle breath and return your mind to its original peace. No matter what the next chapter brings, step forward and meet it with the quiet, untamed smile of the old farmer. Thank you for holding space here today. May you always find stillness on the journey of your life.